All right, let's dive in. Today we're looking at marine worms.
Ooh, interesting.
You might be thinking worms, really? But
Mhm.
trust me, these aren't the kind you're picturing.
Okay.
We're talking about worms that live in coral, disappear in a blink.
Wow.
Some even have, well, let's just say, a bit of a scary reputation.
I can imagine. The ocean's got some pretty crazy creatures.
Exactly. And to understand how crazy, we're starting with the most beautiful ones. First, the Christmas tree worms, and their cousins, the feather duster worms.
Ah, yes. They look like fireworks exploding from the coral.
I know, right? But those blooms aren't just for show, are they?
No, not at all. They are crucial to how those worms breathe, feed, and even sense the world around them.
Seriously. Explain that it looks like they're just, sitting there looking pretty.
Well, those feathery structures you see are covered in tiny little hairs called cilia.
Okay.
Cilia act like filters, trapping plankton and other food.
So they're eating with their Christmas trees. Amazing.
And they also have light-sensitive cells, so if a shadow passes overhead, maybe a predator.
He can retract into their tube really quickly.
So it's a dining table and a security system.
You got it. It's a great example of how evolution leads to these crazy adaptations, helping these worms survive on the reef.
And speaking of the reef, these worms actually burrow into the coral itself,
That's right.
creating their own little hideaways.
Yeah, they're like tiny architects,
That's a good way to put it.
building their homes right there inside the reef.
Which is why they're so hard to spot sometimes.
Exactly. And it's a great example of symbiosis.
How so?
The worm gets a safe home, and the coral benefits because the worm's filtering keeps the water clean.
It's like they're helping each other out.
Yeah, they both get something out of the deal.
Now, are all marine worms this beautiful and harmless?
Oh, not at all. Remember we talked about diversity?
Yeah.
Well, the Christmas tree and feather duster worms are just a tiny part of a much larger group.
Uh-huh.
These are called the polycades.
Okay.
And let me tell you, some of their relatives are, well, a lot more intimidating.
Oh, really? Like who? Well, you've probably heard of the bobbit worm.
Is that the one where, like, it jumps out and grabs fish?
Yep. And those videos you see, those are real.
I've seen those. The powerful jaws, the speed. It's kind of scary, but also so cool.
I know. They look like something out of a movie, right?
They do. How big do they get?
Well, even the longest one ever found, which was almost 3 meters long, was only about as thick as your thumb.
Seriously. I always thought they were, like, huge.
It's all about perspective. Those close-up shots make them look massive.
Right. So maybe not a giant sea monster then.
Not quite, but still a pretty impressive predator.
Definitely. I mean, those jaws are serious business.
For sure. The bobbit worm is an ambush predator built for hunting,
Yeah.
and it has those crazy strong jaws that can snap shut with incredible force, but their diet is actually pretty diverse.
Oh. So they don't just go for the big stuff.
Nope. They'll also scavenge for food and even eat algae when they can.
So they're not just mindless eating machines.
No, they're opportunistic feeders, adapting to whatever food is available.
And that's part of why they're so successful.
Absolutely. Speaking of adapting, did you hear about the one that lived inside a boat for 13 years?
Wait, what? 13 years?
Yep, it probably got in there as a larva, but still.
I can't imagine finding a bobbit worm in my boat.
Right, but it shows how resilient they are, surviving in such a strange environment.
That's wild. Okay, so we've got this worm
Hmm.
that's both a skilled hunter and a survivor.
Uh-huh.
But can anything stand up to them? Or are they the kings of the reef?
Well, nature is full of, checks and balances.
Right.
Even the bobbit worm has its rivals.
Okay, like who?
Well, there's actually this fascinating interaction between bobbit worms and some small fish.
You mean where the fish, like, gang up and squirt water at the worm?
Exactly.
I always thought that was kind of funny.
It does seem a little comical, doesn't it? Tiny fish versus this, fearsome predator.
Right. And how effective can squirting water really be? Those jaws are powerful.
Well, that's the thing. Scientists are still trying to figure it out.
So there's no answer.
Not a definitive one, but there are some pretty interesting theories.
Okay, like what?
Well, one theory is that the water isn't really meant to hurt the worm. It's more about messing with its senses.
It senses.
Yeah. The bobbit worm relies on vibrations and chemical cues to find prey.
Okay.
So the sudden rush of water could throw off its sensory system.
So, like, confusing it?
Exactly. Giving the fish a chance to escape.
Makes sense. I've also heard it might be a way to warn other fish.
That's another theory. The fish could be marking the worm's location.
Like a watch out predator here. signal.
Yeah, a warning system.
That's pretty smart.
It is. And it would be especially helpful on a busy coral reef where fish are constantly trying to avoid danger.
Right. And isn't it mainly the younger fish that do this water squirting?
You're right. It's mostly juveniles.
I wonder why that is.
That's a great question. Maybe younger fish are more vulnerable to the bobbit worm?
Hmm.
Or maybe it's a form of play or practice?
Oh, like training for when they encounter the worm later.
Exactly. It's fascinating to think about.
It really is. All these little creatures have such complex strategies for survival.
Absolutely. And it challenges our idea of what it means to be powerful or dominant in nature.
So, would you say the bobbit worm is the king of the reef?
I think king is too simple of a term.
How so?
Well, it's definitely a powerful predator, but it's not invincible.
Okay.
And its role in the ecosystem is more complicated than just being a, scary monster.
Right. It's all about balance.
Exactly. And that's what's so beautiful about the natural world.
I agree. The more we learn, the more we realize there are no easy answers.
It's a constant dance of adaptation and survival.
And every creature has its part to play.
Well said.
Hmm.
Makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden beneath the waves, doesn't it?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. Yeah, there are so many things we don't know about the ocean.
Right. And it reminds us that even creatures we think are simple,
Yeah.
like worms,
Yeah.
can be incredibly complex and resilient.
They can. So, to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
if you see a video of a bobbit worm or any creature that seems strange or even scary,
Right.
take a moment to dig a little deeper.
I agree.
Look past that first reaction
Yeah.
and think about
Yeah.
what helps this animal survive. How does it live in its environment?
Those are great questions.
What's its story?
Because every creature has a story.
They do, and there's always more to learn.
Absolutely.
That's what makes exploring nature so exciting.
It really is.
You never know what you'll discover.
And you just might find a whole new appreciation for life on Earth.
Exactly. Well, on that note, we'll let you continue your own deep dives into the natural world.
Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.